Welcome to Sustainable Futures with Daniela Bas on the first and the third Saturday every month at 10 a.m. Chess time. Join me for in-depth conversations, exclusive interviews and strategic insights with industry leaders, policymakers and innovators shaping our future. We'll explore how integrating social fairness enhances business and impacts sectors like fashion, food, tech, tourism, sports, and more towards sustainable social change. Every organization gets stronger by challenging itself, so do we. I know it from my own life experience as a woman with a disability who understands the power of resilience, communication, and of thinking out of the box, and as a female executive leader at global level on social sustainability and inclusion. Be inspired, learn, and gain insights. Tune in, think different, and act with purpose. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whichever part of the world you are. Now, I wonder if you had a similar question like mine, that is, how does Google somehow devote attention to inclusion? Because I often hear people saying, myself, if I have to do some research, let me Google. So this posed me a question. Given Google's mission to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, how does Google ensure that its products are truly inclusive, especially for users who may not have access to high-end devices, fast internet, or those who face digital literacy challenges? And so, are there any blind spots Google is currently overlooking? So, I had to ask someone to help me out here. And who is this person? Good morning, Christopher.
Good morning, Daniela. How are you?
I'm fine. Chris, okay, Christopher, and you can correct me here, Patnoe, how do you pronounce your family name?
That was exactly right.
Perfect. Now, you are a seasoned serial program manager at Google, where, you have spent over a decade championing accessibility and disability inclusion. And currently, you're focusing on Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. And these are extremely interesting countries also to reach people who might be living in conflict areas. So, we won't talk about that, but it's very important to reach out to everyone. So, with such a rich background in tech giants you have, like also Disney and Apple, I do know that you excel in managing innovative projects and fostering inclusive environments. So, during your journey from customer service to accessibility advocate, you really offer, and I heard you talking about these topics in various conferences. So, you really offer a wealth of insights into sustainable practices and also social equity in the tech industry. So, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you a question. The very first you already heard, it was my introduction, the curiosity that brought me to contact you. So, as the head of EMEA, and then you can explain our, the audience what that means. So, EMEA, accessibility and disability inclusion at Google. What are the key challenges you are facing in making Google's products more accessible for users with the disabilities? And how are you addressing these challenges, Chris?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's always lovely to see you again. EMEA is an acronym that says Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But I intentionally try to describe it as Africa, Middle East, and Europe when I discuss it, because I think there's an intentionality that you need to have to support people in LMIC, low middle income countries, emerging markets, however you want to describe these things. There's an intentionality to support a place where you have different languages, so many different languages, where you have so many socioeconomic constraints, when you have so many situations where disability is considered almost like like you've been cursed in some parts of Africa. So I start with Africa. In fact, I wear my Kenyan bracelet as a reminder that you need to be present and you need to focus there intentionally because it doesn't happen by accident. And the same thing is true about inclusion in general, accessibility in general. How do we start? We start by recognizing that our tools are not by default always accessible. So you have to start with the intention to make it so, which means you need to build a relationship with the community. So only someone who's blind can tell you what it's like to be blind in this world that wasn't necessarily designed for us in mind. Only someone who is deaf can tell us the deaf experience. So with that base layer of partnership with the community, can we understand where the opportunities are, and then where we have where we can use the technology that we develop to create innovative experiences. And I want to talk about innovation as opposed to compliance. I'm you can tell I live in England, but I don't sound English by any stretch of the imagination. I moved here a few years ago to get Google ready for the European Accessibility Act. And legislation is an important part of having the conversation because it gets people to pay attention in a way that they may not in any other way. But we don't want to focus just on this compliance mindset because it ends up being the lowest common denominator. How little can I get away with?
Mhm.
So when I talk about this kind of work, I want to talk about the innovations that are there, not just how do you make it compliant. But honestly, you have to have it be compliant or else the rest of it won't work. But I don't want to talk about compliance because one, is boring, and two, it's not the fun part. The fun part is creating, for example, Live Transcribe on Android, which has the ability to live transcribe over 120 different languages, allowing someone who is deaf or hard of hearing to go to the doctor, participate in church, just engage in the world that they couldn't otherwise. Or there is the feature on the Pixel phones called Guided Frame, which uses computer vision and some machine learning to recognize what a face looks like and how much of a face is there and provide real-time guidance in terms of how to take a good picture, either a selfie or in front. And these things only happen by that partnership with the community.
Well, this triggers in me another question, and it is to dig a tiny bit more into the concept of innovation.
Mhm.
So, I wonder, Chris, if you can provide maybe some insights into any upcoming accessibility features or technologies that Google is currently developing or planning to roll out in the region you just mentioned, Africa, Europe, and Middle Eastern countries. Is there something that you can already share with us about that?
I can't tell any secrets, but
No?
I can say you can look into a couple of different areas where you will see some exciting things to happen. For example, I was mentioning Guided Frame just a moment ago. This is a really wonderful experience, and it was designed first for people who were blind. But
Mhm.
every time I give a tour at the Accessibility Discovery Center, I end with taking a selfie of the people in the room with me, and you turn on the screen reader. It's called TalkBack, and then you hear the phone guide you in terms of how to take a good picture. We've been told a million times, I'd love to have that, but I don't want to use TalkBack. So we sort of curb cutted it into now this third generation of this feature now will work without having the screen reader be active. So we've taken this thing designed for people who are blind and made it applicable for anybody. Or another thing that's interesting is the use of AI. And I don't want to go too deep in here because it has a lot of scary connotations and a lot of powerful connotations. The fact is, it's just a tool, and it's a tool that
Mhm.
can really help a lot of people when it's thoughtfully done, when it's collaboratively created and designed. For example, I'm really excited what's happening in Chrome OS, our Chromebook platform, where we're using AI and optical character recognition, or OCR, to understand PDFs and provide a contextual understanding of what's actually there. That's going to make so much content really valuable and useful for education and work. So these are the areas I'm excited, the sort of innovation and iterative innovation, but also the use of thoughtful AI to solve these core challenges.
Well, there is a growing debate about the role of AI in accessibility.
Mhm.
And some argue that artificial intelligence can perpetuate biases against persons with disabilities. So I wonder how Google is addressing these ethical, if you wish, concerns while developing also artificial intelligence driven accessibility tools.
Of course, this is really important, and I think it's important to state that without intention, and again, I'm starting here with intentionality, it can reinforce these biases because AI is sort of a normalization machine, and the more common something is, the easier it is for AI to create this automation. But this could reinforce negative bias, so that's real. And what do we do to try to combat it? Is we have a series of AI principles around inclusion and around responsible AI that we follow. So we start off with the understanding that the AI can be biased. So we create processes and tools to help us understand where the bias is and how to solve them. And then we publish these principles into the world so people can understand how we think about it. So people can understand through transparency how to make their AI and how we think about making our AI better.
In your teams developing these tools, do you also have persons with different kinds of disabilities, not because of the disability per se, but because they're professional in the field related to what you guys are doing there, but and yet having a disability of either visual or physical or else, might be part of the team that provides also some, how can I say, inspires the whole team, particularly when it comes to developing new tools, to keep in mind these aspects you just mentioned.
Well, the easy answer is almost certainly. We don't require someone to share whether or not they have a disability. But as a company, Google wide, we have in our latest annual diversity report, a diversity annual report, about 6.5% of Googlers acknowledge having a disability. I
Hmm.
know personally people who are in our research organizations focusing on AI, who are deaf, who have autism, who are blind. They do this work because they do this work, and some of are drawn to it for the sake of I want to build it for me, and some are drawn to it because it's just a really interesting challenge.
Hmm.
We intentionally we have a program here in Europe, for example, to hire people with disabilities. And it's not because of any kind of tick box exercise that are coming
Yeah.
from governments. It's because it's what we need to do. We want to have the best candidates, and sometimes some people need a little help in terms of
Hmm.
getting through the system, in terms of having the right tools inside the company to make sure that they can thrive. So,
Don't tell
because of
me. I
that
mean,
intentionality, we have both.
right. I mean, you know that I use a wheelchair since I was a kid, and I do know how difficult it is sometimes to find the right job based on the skills and the interests and the passions we have. By the way, and then I have another question for you, Chris. We haven't described ourselves for those who might not be able to see us either because they're driving and listening us in Spotify, or because they're watching the YouTube video and they might have some visual impairments. So here I am today. I look like sort of a panther, leopard, whatever. I'm wearing a shirt with black brownish spots, and I'm wearing my usual glasses with this violet pinkish frame and the short hair. What about you?
Well, I honestly generally don't do descriptions because so often many people in the blind community think it's performative. But what I will say
Okay.
is I'm wearing a black T-shirt, I have gray hair, piercings, and a little chin facial hair like Dizzy Gillespie because I refuse to give up.
So, but this was not just for those who are, as I said, who might have visual impairments, but also for those who might be listening right now, who can see perfectly but can't see us because they're just, as I said, either listening instead of watching us in the YouTube channel. Now, let's change a teeny bit topic, though focusing on Google. Now, I'm sure that you must have some very interesting stories from your work at Google. So, what's the most surprising and unexpected feedback you have received from users in general about the products you're talking about, Or if you want to talk about also accessibility features, that's also fine. So some surprising stories, unexpected.
Yeah, so I want to tell the story about two things, and they're related. The first is the Accessibility Discovery Center that we built here in London. Um,
Mhm.
it is a place where we bring people from outside Google to learn about inclusive design, to learn about accessibility and disability inclusion. We use video games with AT to help dispel some of the stigmas of disability. We talk about mainstream kit like a braille slate or a steady spoon. And then we show some of the tools that both Google, but also our friends at Apple and Microsoft and Sony and Samsung have. So for me, the fact that there's so many solutions for people with disabilities, whether it's something as complicated as something that's AI based or as simple as a button that you use a computer with, just the fact that people have never heard of some of these solutions that could deeply impact their life is a surprise and is unfortunate. And these ADCs, we built the first one in London in 2022, December. We've had over 4,000 people come through since December 2022. And right now it's the end of August 2024. That's a lot of people coming through. We built two others. There's one in Dublin and there's one in Zurich. But by the end of the year, we're going to have another one in Munich, and we're going to have pop-ups in Milan, Dubai, and in Paris. So it's really exciting for me to see us take this platform of the Accessibility Discovery Center and teach people in their own language, in their own country, about the tools that exist that could help them. This is what's so exciting for me, is nothing special other than the fact that if you don't know it, it can't help you.
But to see
And
the expression on the faces of people surprised. So that's actually probably what is unexpected from you when you share, whatever they can see in. By the way, Christopher, if someone would like to visit one of these places, how can they do that?
yeah, so you can email us. It's free. We don't charge anything for this. You don't have to have a relationship with Google. You don't need to have a business relationship. It's open to anyone, and you can feel free to reach out to us here in London, and we can connect. Because every place has their own slight different email. So just to make it easier, you can email us at adclondon@google.com, and we can help pass you on to the right people if you're not in the UK.
And say, I would like to visit, what would be the best way to formulate the email?
Just say, hey, I am so and so. I have lived experience, or this is a professional interest, and I'd like to visit the ADC in some city, or just I'd like to visit the ADC. What's possible, and we'll help you as best we can.
This is wonderful. This is actually making things easy and accessible to everyone, right?
Yes.
Christopher, now we move to the second part of this podcast, and usually talks about the past, the present, and the future, since the title of this podcast is, conversations on sustainable futures.
Mm.
So we also have to focus about the future because the past is our roots, if you wish. The present is what we're doing now in order to, if we have a vision, see that vision become a reality in the future. So, once upon a time, by, by looking back at the past, how do you think your actions or Google or other good practices you might wish to share because you have a vast working experience? As we said, the last decade is in Google, but you had also many other working experiences in accessibility and inclusion. So by looking at back at the past, and if you look at accessibility and inclusion and what you have been observing, how do you think that what you have done has impacted where we are today?
In terms of the past impacting where we are today, um, I think I need to
Things
look
you
at the.
did, maybe.
Well, I give a brief story, a bit of my brief history, because I think it tells something
Yes,
interesting.
please.
I'm not an average engineer. I'm a trained singer. I studied classical music in school. I'm a failed opera singer. In my mid 20s, I realized I was making more money waiting on tables than I was singing. So I got involved in tech, but because I lived in Cupertino, I found myself at Apple. And I worked at Apple for 10 years on the first iPod, on the first iTunes, the G4 Towers, G5 Towers, Final Cut Studio. Then I went and did phones for a couple of years. Then I did games. I discovered accessibility here at Google because my product wasn't accessible. And what happened, we had a test engineer that came in. She turned on voiceover on an iPhone, and I heard button, 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 button. I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, this is Google Play Music for someone who's blind." I said, "Well, that's stupid. How do they use it?" He said, "Well, they don't. That's why I'm here." So I guess, so that was my introduction. I never thought of it, never heard of it. My grandparents were just old. I was just bad at spelling and data processing, bad at details, all those things. I never thought about deafness or dyslexia. The difference is that I made a choice to lean in. I made a choice to be involved. It would have been very easy for me to just say, we don't, it doesn't need to matter, but I couldn't look away. So I volunteered to take on accessibility for the Google Play suite of products, and then I continued down. It became my day job, my passion. So you can join the movement at any time. You just have to care enough to do so. And working for others, working on behalf of people that will never know your name, is the greatest joy. And it's changed my life.
Wow, this was a serendipity actually. You were looking for something and you found something else, a treasure inside you you didn't know you had, and now
I
you're
didn't
sharing it with others.
I didn't know I was looking. It just
Yeah.
found me, and I couldn't stop.
Ah, I have goosebumps. Thanks for sharing this. Now, so now we know how all of that brought you into the present. So, what innovative strategies implemented in Google successfully promote social equity and inclusion within sustainability initiatives, in your view?
I think an important thing to realize, and I don't want anyone who's listening here to think that we think we've got it, that we were perfect. We make mistakes all the time. This is a process we've created.
Mhm.
We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have bugs. We're going to get it wrong, because there's no such thing as perfection when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to disability, or even sustainability, because the technology changes around us. People's expectations change. So I think the mindset of progress over perfection, I think, is the most important part of what we do in terms of the creation of these processes that gets us more accessible, more inclusive, and more sustainable. Because it's a really big world. People are complicated, structures are complicated, institutions are complicated. But if you don't take that first step, like I did 12 years ago, 10 years ago, you're never going to get started. And once you get started, don't stop, and don't ever rest on your laurels, because there's always someone doing better than you. There's always someone needs who are greater, or the world's a big place and a lot of stuff we have to fix. So just don't stop, and don't let that be, and let that be okay, because this is never going to be a type A kind of tick box and you're done. You're never going to be done. So enjoy the ride. Find those small wins, and let that propel you into the future.
So, if we enjoy the ride, let's imagine, actually, you have to imagine to be 20 years old in the year 2071. So, what kind of future would you hope to see unfold? And what specific contributions or actions uh, do you think you or Google should prioritize in the present to bring that vision to life? Your vision of when you're going to be 20 in 2071 to life in a sustainable future, also for the generations to come, those who are not
Mm.
born yet.
From an accessibility perspective, I wanted to see this integration of AI and augmented reality come to fold, become
Mhm.
the flower of greatness that I think it can, so that many disabilities, when it comes to sensory disabilities, hearing and vision, are just taken care of. You have the tools so that you can see what you need. You can understand it. You can hear what's there, or you can see what you should be hearing. I would love for technology just to solve that from being an issue, and then through the same technology, allow people like you to have the tools in a chair where it won't matter whether there's a stair or a lift. We just have the tools that make it work. So the disabilities don't matter. It's not that we don't want to have disabilities. We want to have it. Is that the tool chain, the infrastructure, the world we live in just accommodates it. So it is nothing any more different than having gray hair like I do, or beautiful brown hair as you do. It's who we are, but it doesn't impact how we live.
I love it. So, Chris, we are almost at the end of this wonderful, interesting, exciting, energizing conversation. So, which question would you ask yourself, and what would be the answer you're giving to yourself? Something I haven't asked you, or something you ask yourself daily or often, and what kind of answer would you give to that question of yours?
Why keep fighting? And it's one of these things where you don't know who's going to benefit the work we're doing. So you keep fighting because it's worth it. There's someone there who will never know your name, who will never know you exist, whose life will be better. So why keep fighting? Why keep pushing? It's for that person who will never know you. Their life will be better.
You have become emotional here. You're so sweet. Thank you so much, Christopher. All right, guys, we had this wonderful, guest with us today. And Chris, if someone has further questions or would like to contribute or else, is there a way for people to reach, I'm not saying you personally, but to reach out to Google in London, for instance, where you have this center, as you said, this office focusing on making sure that accessibility and inclusion is done in a sustainable manner for everyone. We spoke about mainly about persons with disabilities today, but of course, I think of older persons, I think of youth, I think of gender balance or imbalance. I mean, everything that is related to inclusion and accessibility. If there are any questions, how can we further try to find the answers through Google or with Google, if possible?
I'd say use the adclondon@google.com email address, and it'll come to me, or we can find a place to redirect it where we can. We can't do it for everything and for everyone, but it is a place that I know that I get to see, and is managed by people that I trust. And together we'll do what we can.
Grazie mille, Christopher. Have a wonderful day there in London.
Prego 500. Ciao.
Ciao. As I wrap up this episode, my heartfelt gratitude to today's guest and to all of you. Join me for the next episode as we delve deeper with special guests, uncovering thought-provoking insights and actionable steps, paving the way for a brighter, inclusive, sustainable tomorrow. Thanks also to Damian Morton, music, and Maria Cortez Gagliano, social media. Don't miss out next episode on shaping the future we aspire to. Ciao, ciao!